Hey you guys. So, when I do any video on here, essentially I want to talk about things that I think are very important when it comes to maybe topics that I think are maybe being discussed a little bit more. Um, Anything that's kind of on the mind that I feel like other people are thinking about as well. Some stories sometimes that I think about that can relate to those. Things that maybe people can learn from, kind of take inspiration from. When it comes to music, same kind of applies, whether it's more recent songs, it's hey, these are how these lyrics are very important. This is what people can get from it, whether it is that like inspirational piece and that moving piece, or if it is just a vibe. And that's even too how it kind of goes for movies and shows. A lot of the time for some of these things, if I think about you often, you obviously hold some like some matter, like you are taking up some piece in my brain where it's just in the middle of a random day, I just start thinking about you. And I'm like, you mean something. You're substantial. So essentially, I'm going to go into another realm with this. Normally, when I've talked about books that I've read, they've been nonfiction. Well, that has changed. And you're probably wondering, because I've started reading some series that are definitely fictional. I would say starting April this year. And you're probably wondering, well, why are you now talking about it? Well, I think for a lot of us, we're like, oh, is that a little bit too telling in regards to like what I read, what I like? But at the same time, I've talked about things on here that, like, for instance, Jurassic World / Jurassic Park, where it's like, oh, would you not be embarrassed of that too? And I'm not. So, I finally am just biting it and I'm doing it. So, the author that I want to talk about today and the book series that I want to talk about today, they are written by Ana Huang. And essentially, the first series that I read was the Twisted series. So, if you've seen these on TikTok, essentially it starts with Twisted Love, Twisted Games, Twisted Hate, and then Twisted Lies. So, there's four books in the series. And essentially, they are all like interconnected. And what's really interesting is so the Twisted series is like the middle series. There is a series before that came out called the If Love series. So you will meet, or at least it's referenced in the Twisted series, some of those characters that you hear about, or some of those things, whether it's businesses, just little references in regards to what you may have read in the If Love series. Now, the other fun thing is, after the Twisted series, is still the ongoing series, King of Sins series. So right now, it just ended with Sloth, or I guess I shouldn't say ended, but the fourth book is Sloth. So we've had Wrath, Pride, Greed, and Sloth. We still need Gluttony, Lust, and Envy. Envy is coming out next, which is next year. And then we will have, I don't know if this is a new series, so bear with me, but there is going to be another book that comes out written by Anna called The Striker. And from what I've heard, again, I don't know if it's just like any of these can be standalone books too. You don't have to read them all. But I think for some, if you're like me, you like things that are connected. So you feel like, oh, hey, maybe I miss my people from like the If Love series. Oh, hey, they're referenced somewhere within, whether it's King of Sins or Twisted. Same with Twisted. I was very heartbroken because that was the first series I read. And then you just get to the ending, and it's like, essentially everyone lives happily ever after, that sort of deal. Like, you can tell, like, hey, we're done now. And I will be honest, I got kind of sad because I was like, but you only have 4 books. You can't be done, which I don't know what else they would have milked out unless it was like a future series for like the things that happen at the end. So like maybe a time period jump or what have you. But luckily for me, they're mentioned in the King of Sin series. So I think, again, if you like somebody, if you like, if you are somebody, I wish I could speak. If you are somebody that likes things that are connected, here you go. It's essentially like, hey, the prequels are If Love, the OG is Twisted, and now the sequel is King of Sins. Now, the Striker is going to come out, and the Striker 2 is connected to these, particularly Twisted series and the King of Sin series. And again, I don't know if that's going to be like other sports references, like if we meet other characters that are sports related, or what's all going to happen there. I have no idea, but I'm excited to read it because every time Anna writes something, now I feel like I just gotta read it. And that's the thing too, when it came to the Twisted series, I wasn't even going to read it. Like, I went with my mom to the bookstore. I picked out a completely different book. But she was like, "Oh, I've got to find this like Twisted Love or this Twisted series because my friend recommended it." And I was like, again, for me, I'm not a big fiction reader. But my mom was telling me about it and she got the first two books. And she gave me the one because she's like, "Oh, you kind of talked about that." I said, "Mom, I didn't want to read this. I really don't care." And she gave it to me anyway. Moms, So she gave it to me anyway. And then I did end up like of course reading the back, like what am I in for? I was kind of curious, so then I read it and then I got sucked in. And then I finished it. Now, here's what I will say. When it comes to that series, and I think a lot of people kind of feel the same way, the first book is fine. Like, it's definitely not my favorite in regards to just the writing and some of the things that happen. Now, the rest of them, like Twisted Games, will always have my heart. Like, I think it's because of the trope that happens in there. But then I also did love me my Twisted Lies, mostly because of Christian. Christian's my boy. And in the King of Sin series, Dante's my boy. Like, and when I say that, like, I'd want to be friends with them, not really like, oh, I want you. It's more so like I would hang out with you if given the opportunity. That's just me. But again, I very much recommend it. Like, some of these things, of course, like they feel kind of realistic. When me and my mom talked about when she first started the Twisted series, I finished before her. Like, that's an accomplishment. But she read Twisted Love and she's like, "Yeah, it's just that's not my favorite." I'm like, "No, it's not mine either. Like, the characters you don't mind, it's just the things that kind of happen." But we agreed, like, as they kind of go on, we loved them. Like, we fell in love with them. Same with the King series. My mom, because here's the thing, the If Love series isn't bad. It's just my favorite book in there is the third book. So that's the one on Chris and Nate. And essentially, like, all of these two can be standalone. You don't have to read them all if you don't want to. Because I'm still upset with my mother. She didn't finish King of Pride. She didn't like that one, so she only got like a few pages, like I'd say at least 100 or so pages in, and she was like, "Nothing's happening," and I'm like, you gotta wait a bit. It's a slow one, but she didn't finish it. But anyway, you all of them are standalone. You don't have to read them all if you don't want to. If maybe there's a trope you don't like, if maybe you read the back and you're like, "Oh, I don't think I'm gonna like these characters too much," that's okay. Like, again, you don't have to read them all. It's just fun because, again, if you read later in some of them, maybe they're mentioned there. So it's like a fun little game on what book were you in? Where did you start? What's your personality? So that's just kind of my recommendation. Again, here and there I'll think about it. My life. But here and then I'll think about the series, any one of them, and I'm like, I really did enjoy it. Half of me has been contemplating like rereading Twisted in particular, since that was the first one I started with, and then going into King of Sins. Um, but then you have Striker that comes out, and so that'll be really interesting once that one comes out, because the character in there, the male in particular, the male character, he's been mentioned in a few of the books. So it's just fun to kind of see what's going to happen. How do you know these people? Who could be mentioned in the next one? That sort of thing. So that's just kind of my recommendation. You don't have to read them if you don't want to, but again, just another thing that sometimes just pops up in my mind. Like maybe you need to read them again instead of what you're reading now. So that's just my thoughts on it. Feel free to leave your thoughts down below if you have watched if you have read the Twisted series, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye.